Welcome to the Ascension Stargate podcast series, where we discuss the aspects of human consciousness, spirituality, metaphysics and philosophy, energy, extraterrestrial life, science, biology, and the alchemy of higher states of beingness, all from a heart-centered perspective. I am your host and guide, Glenn Mate, and let's begin our journey.
And welcome to another episode of the Ascension Stargate podcast series. And today we have another truly amazing gift. This is such a wonderful human being, and I am so grateful and honored to have Kimo Kepano on our podcast today. So let's talk a little bit about Kimo. Kimo Kepano is a Kanaka Maoli high seer with over 30 years of educational experience. And as a healer, he has worked with more than 10,000 cases and students. Kimo can perceive energy spectrums and frequencies using this skill for medical purposes. Kimo is at the forefront of energy consciousness and aims to bridge between science and spiritual growth. The Light Seer pedagogy is teaching his students to heal beyond the biofield and work with frequencies that are unique to each individual. Kimo has been featured on programs like the Travel Channel and Gaia's Beyond Belief with George Norrie, and he strives to channel the highest alignment of your most authentic future. Kimo, thank you for joining me today. I am honored, and again, I love you, my brother. How are you today?
First of all, Glenn, thank you for that. I love any excuse to have a play date. So any excuse to have a play date with Glenn. In fact, when I look up because you and I have had play dates before,
Yes.
And I create very extensive notes on all of my play dates, and your note at the very, very top says, "Love this brother." Literally, that's what it says. Love this brother. I have so much fun with you. But let me just kind of go a little bit further and explain to your listeners and your viewers, who the heck is this guy? So to introduce myself, aloha kako, my name is Kimo. And when we describe ourselves, for me aboriginally, as what a Kanaka Maoli high seer translates into, Yanana Loko, translates into the ability to perceive frequency. Now, anciently, in my old lineage, all of the chiefs and queens and kings of Hawaii all had a seer. They all had seers, which means those were the individuals who could look into the timelines, essentially being the prophets of the time. And then the high seer was the evolved individual who was not only able to perceive timelines, but consciousness, spirit, tune into healing modalities, and more. And to take on the role of high seer for me was a bit of a challenge, because I don't want anything to feel like it feeds into ego, and the language of high kind of felt like it was a bit of an egoic thought. So I do take on the pseudonym of the light seer, which translates into I take all the abilities that I have been trained in, all the abilities that are natural to me, and I strive to educate and to be of assistance to others. So my origin story, this is my DC Marvel origin story. When I was a small kid, at the age of 2 weeks old, I was dropped on my head in the Honolulu airport in Hawaii. And my skull shattered. It shattered. I had to go to the doctor, and my father explains that the x-rays looked like shattered window pane glass. Now, from there, doctors speculate, I don't know if this is actually true, but they speculate that my ability to see frequency was happening because my prefrontal cortex and my visual cortex centers are damaged. So they believe that that's probably why I can see frequency. I don't know if that's the reason why or not, but it's a really fun origin story. Cracked the skull, and then all the information came forward. But what I do know, what I'm very, very aware of since the time that I was 3 years old, when I was first being documented as a child, is that the world does look like frequency for me. But what's really helpful to know is that it looks like frequency for me at this point in my life when I choose to. As a kid, I couldn't turn it off. But now I've learned how to engage. And what it really helps me identify is how the world is always in motion. Always. There is always pathways of frequency continually in motion. And we can utilize that through a variety of things. We can utilize that through healing modalities. When I get the opportunity to work with your surgeon or your doctor or your practitioner, identifying what's going on in the body looks like something because the cells in the body change, they delay in the system. When someone is experiencing heavy emotions, the body looks different to me because of the way that the energetic systems and your EMF changes, the way that the energy is moving around the top of a building down to the blades of grass, the way that you tune into the energetic laws of attraction. It all looks like something. And when you learn how to codify that and to really take note of what is the consistency, then I learned I was able to teach it. So when I say that I've been teaching for over 30 years, I know that I look young. I'm not that young. I am pushing 50. But when I take a look at the way that I've been teaching this since I was 15 years old, in the way that things happen and things align to be of assistance to other individuals. And I feel very, very fortunate at this point in my life to have worked with so many individuals. I do strive in my pedagogy to teach other individuals how to do what I do. I am very aware that what I do sounds wild and wacky, but my goal is to normalize it. To normalize how intuition manifests, which looks like something, by the way. Intuition looks like patterns. When you identify how to work into healing modalities, Reiki, whatever that is, energy drainage, it all looks like something. So if we can identify what your body is actually wanting, or what the body, how the body wants to stimulate, if there's a problem in the body will always tell us what it actually needs. If we can pay attention to those signs, then technically everyone can learn to be seer. It just takes time and process, and that's what I feel like I'm here to do. So that being said,
and you're also the teacher, so you have all of these wonderful classes that people can work with you to better understand, to learn this process of seeing. And how wonderful is that? Because we all come into this life with special gifts, and I'm so grateful that you came in with this gift to share with not only just me, but with other people. And to know that we're not necessarily gifted people. We all have certain abilities that we can tap into.
Yeah.
And as long as we're willing to devote the time and effort to cultivating these teachings and understanding them in the way that we can comprehend it, and then diligently working, that we all have these great abilities. And we're just expanding the collective consciousness as we do that.
I'm really grateful that you adjust that language a little bit. You speak about it as gift and as ability, and I actually agree. As a child, one of the things that was labeled on me that I wasn't comfortable with is that we have a very gifted child. And what it sounds like when someone says that, and they don't even do it on purpose, but what it sounds like is, oh, well, if that person is gifted, that means that they're the only ones that can do that. Or that is my gifted person and this person is not. And I don't want to look at it that way. I want to look at it as that individual, me, for example, I just so happen to be tuned in, right? And because every single individual has access to those patterns of frequency, regardless if you want to do intuition or better health, everyone has access to that. So instead of looking at it as only a select few that have the gift, we can look at it as, well, what do you want to tune into? If you want to tune into that frequency of money or of healing or of relationship, then let me teach you how to find that frequency, because it's always on. It's always on. You just have to figure out, how do I get my body to acclimate and understand that specific pattern of frequency?
I love that. It's, just like watching a program on television. So if you're watching whatever it may be, or maybe some great, Harry Potter novel, well, you could watch that, but as that's happening, all of these other channels and all of these other programs and all of these other frequencies of information are coming through simultaneously.
Oh, yeah.
The moment you're just tuned in to watching Harry Potter because that has your interest.
I love that. Which, by the way, I mean, if you have a conversation with JK talks about it as the information just is channeling through, because really when we're identifying how do I allow my artistry, my creative mind, my imagination to work with intuition, it becomes a scaffolding and a support network. So therefore, to channel the information of Harry Potter, technically, though it's using the creative mind, is channeling insight through. And to go a step further, for all you Potterheads out there, when you look at the visualization, or if you're just reading the books on what the Dementors are, if you could look at what the pattern of frequency around depression addiction looks like, it's very similar to the idea of the Dementor, which means energy siphon, energy drainage, can't control unless you understand how to be so powerfully clear. And in Potterhead language, they use the idea of Dementor and Patronus, right? Which is, how do I become so clear that my body exudes such power that it moves outside, it moves addiction and depression away. But addiction and depression looks visually like frequencies.
Absolutely. Now that's a good thing to get into. So we could jump into this. I'm off
Mm-hmm.
spur of the moment is that, you know, as we expand our energy, as we grow and continue to bring in more light, we are always
Mm-hmm.
expanding that frequency of light. And the dark matter cannot be near our light because our light is so bright. It is sending the dark away. And, many people think that, oh, I've got to watch out for demons. I've got to watch out for all of these
Mm-hmm.
entities that are always lurking and looking for me. And maybe, yes, that could be a potential, because if your energy drops and you go into those lower vibrations and stay there as a frequency, you're adjusting your frequency to the low frequency,
Yeah.
right?
Right. So let's go even a step further, Glenn. If we were to go a step further to identify, what I have to do in order to remain so clear that I'm not affected by all that. One of my largest lessons that I teach is, once you get clear, truly, once you get clear, everything becomes clear, which means that I will clean my generational line going up, my generational line going down. I will clear the way that I perceive the world in front of me. I will perceive my trauma differently. I will perceive my perspective on what I want to accomplish in my life. I will perceive it differently. Now, to go down the existential route for just a moment, when we take a look at the idea of demon and attachment and demonic forces or dark matter energy, it is actually critical to our development to perceive it. It's actually a part of our development, because if you and I were only in high frequency, highest version of aligned self 24 hours out of the day, there would be no reason for us to experience this life. If we were only in high alignment, our homeostasis would be so awesome that we wouldn't have to experience the lessons of being here. So when we can reconfigure our understanding and our existential thoughts of, but why do I perceive depression? Why am I so heavily depressed? Well, our goal is to move through it, but to learn the action of that lesson from it. So that way, when I do perceive depression or addictive qualities in my behavior, I want to get to know why. Because when I can find its polarity, the universe is a series of polarity frequencies, then that shining of that light to get brighter is the polarity of what that depression is. And that's part of our learning. So once we get to that place, it's actually, when you can look at it as harmony, what is the lowest frequency of this versus the highest polarity of that, then it's actually a lot easier to maintain this system of high alignment, with understanding that we will drop periodically to learn those lessons, then to bring ourselves as high into that frequency for as long as we can until the next curve hits, because we are human, and then we continue to move forward with our lessons.
Absolutely. It's kind of like, if we to take a look at the, long exponential values of the stock market, it has its
Mm.
dips, it has its ebbs and flows, but traditionally, since its inception, has always gone up since we've hit that Great Depression, so to speak of, right? After we recalibrated, we've always maintained an upward trajectory. Now, no one knows what's going to happen tomorrow, but to use that analogy, of course, we still, ebb and flow and take those short little dips, and we could be sad for a couple of days or in a slight depression for a couple of days. But if we sit in it and understand it and perceive it, we can work through it. And it is
Mm.
not the label that we have to wear day in and day out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's also a really good example, meaning that at least for all of your listeners who are in the US, everyone in their history learns what the Great Depression was, the fall of the stock market. But look at how we identify, and we have made great changes since that stock market crash happened in 1929, which means we know a lot more information now, so we don't return back to that same faulty system, which means the entire US system got a reboot. Now, it created a lot of umbrage and pain, and a lot of death happened at that time, but we learned from that experience. Our entire system is built on a completely new platform because of the Great Depression. So the Great Depression was one of those awakenings. It was one of those system reboots in the US.
Mm. And thank goodness, because hopefully we will not make the same mistake. And as we move into, the energy of the potential global system, of a global financial system, that's going to be another new energy. And some of us will be for it, some of us will be in resistance, some will have neutrality, but we'll all be able to get through that.
Oh man, that's a whole other topic point. It's a whole other one.
Right. So, Kimo, talking about lower frequency, higher frequency, can you explain to our viewers a little bit about how you interpret frequency and what you might be seeing, sensing, feeling, tasting as you start to work with somebody or work with a group?
So it depends on what the group is asking for. If I'm working with a group that is just wanting to kind of bring their intuitions online, then I actually have to change my filtration system. Because there's so many vast frequencies that you can work with, you essentially have to be an energetic polyglot. You've got to learn how to transfer your brain to think in a different language. So let's just say that I'm doing a workshop where everyone wants to come see me to learn about intuition. Well, then I have to put on the filtration system to see what the patterns look like of intuition, because there's many, many more than our conventional 5 intuitions. Most psychics will work with approximately 5: smelling and taste and touch and sight and hearing and knowing. Right? But when you can look at just those 5, if you can break them down into what does the frequency of sight look like, the frequency of smell, because it has a pattern to it, if you look at that and then keep that filtration system on of looking at those patterns, then all of a sudden you will see many, many, many patterns of intuitions that are not categorized yet, that aren't actually in books yet, because we're kind of on the edge of that right now, but learning how to quantify how intuition manifests as patterns. So if I'm in a session with a group of people and they're wanting to know intuition, then I turn on that goggle of focusing on pattern, which means the patterns of frequency for every individual. We'll just use you for an example. Glenn has rising intuitions that do this, and dormant intuitions that are ready to come online, and then dominant intuitions that are hot fire online. You will have intuitions that may be blocked due to trauma or circumstances or negating. And sometimes, for some individuals, this is very rare, but sometimes if my intuition, let's just say that I'm a very high aligned clairsentient individual, if I do not learn how to keep it in alignment, if I negate it, if I go through trauma and I do not exercise it, then sometimes those patterns will invert their frequency and it becomes a malady, which means the opposition of clairsentience, that is someone who's high in alignment, who's not doing it, who is only focused on trauma, who does not know how to get their head out of their butt. The lowest alignment of clairsentience that we have found consistently, and the way that we have mapped over 10,000 clients, is gut-related issues. IBS, celiac, Graves, things like that.
Right. So they're suppressing that
natural frequencies for them.
frequency.
Right. So let's just say, I might go down another diversion.
Sure.
Let's just say that, Glenn, you've asked me to go meet with your doctor. And I'm like, great, your doctor is open-minded. He wants to meet with me. Fantastic. If I go to meet with your doctor says, well, before we show you anything, before Glenn tells you a single thing, what do you perceive? The very first thing I'm going to perceive is, well, let me just quickly take a look at his alignment of his patterns of frequency. in terms of intuition. So if I put on those goggles and if I see, well, I'm talking to someone, Glenn, who actually has a high potency of clairsentience, but he has not done anything with it. He's probably traumatized it. He's never wanted to engage with it. His gut right now looks like it's off to me. The very first thing I'm going to say is, are you going to ask me about his gut-related issues? And your doctor would more than likely say, well, how did you know that? So, well, first things first is his frequency is inverted. And if they want to go a step further, then they'll say, can you tell us more? And I'll say, okay. And then I put on the goggles of medical stuff, which means let me take a look. And now in that centralized area of his body, is there now some kind of equilibrium of misaligned emotions, right? Which means that if we can find if there's an imbalance of your negative emotions, if you and I can handle the emotions, this is the part that blows a medical practitioner's mind. It will change in minutes. Now, some people it doesn't. Some people it might take days or weeks. But if you are truly ready to do the work, literally minutes, Glenn, where the doctor will usually say, well, that must be a miracle, or we must have misdiagnosed.
Right.
So
And the
now,
miracle is the person accepting a new paradigm. I can be healed. Right?
accepting and believing it to be true.
Right.
Which is why belief is such a strong paramount sensation, regardless if you are religious, regardless if you are spiritual. Belief is the strongest aspect, right? So now let's go back to the original question. If I was leading a group based on intuition, I would start with frequency work. If I'm working on a group that is wanting to get insight about health, then I actually wouldn't even put on the intuition goggles first. I would just say, well, let's just cut to the chase. What is you wanted to go on health based on what? Health based on bad emotion, health based on depression, health based on some kind of autoimmune that the doctors don't understand. Okay, well, then we'll go down that route. I just have to change my filtration system.
And that's completely amazing. There's so many things that will be growing in the next, I want to say like 3 decades. Intuitively, I know that, and I'm sure you would agree with that, is that we're going to be expanding our medical knowledge that will encompass consciousness in a whole new way that is not of the psychiatric necessarily, but more of how things are functioning within our body and how our consciousness directly is affecting that.
We're actually closer than 30 years. I think that about 30 years would be appropriate for like larger consciousness, but there are many Western medicine trained individuals who want to know this information now, who want to know it now. Let me just think if I can say this out loud. I won't say the exact group, but I have been approached by the National Institution of Health when it comes to certain doctors who have asked the big question. So why does it work? But how, when he changes that, but how did that work so quickly? We want to know. We're very curious about that. So because of those conversations, certain institutions have then connected me to the National Institution of Health, which means it's happening now. It is a very, very slow process, but we're actually starting to see that information now. And I want to hurry up. I want to go faster.
Lucky for all of us, that time is actually speeding up.
Mm-hmm.
So we can certainly expect an exponential growth in lots of fields within the next coming, I want to say, probably 3 to 5 years. Things are going to change. I mean, we still have a lot of work to do here with Mother Gaia and her evolution of her consciousness. But with that being said, as she changes her consciousness, that also gives us the green light to change and up level ours.
Yes.
So we are on this growth path that is going to be leaps and bounds. Probably just about every 2 years, we'll be 2 times or 3 times far ahead as we were the year before or that period.
Yep.
Which is just an exciting time to be here. And thank goodness we all came here at the same time to play.
Right? Right?
So, thank you for that, Kimo. And that kind of leads into a little bit about light language. Now, I speak light language, and for me, it came out of nowhere. It was just something that I was doing in my home at my own altar, and all of a sudden, this feeling, in my throat chakra starts to come out. I'm like, maybe I should feel like I should talk about this or say whatever vowels, sounds, whatever was coming out. And lo and behold, a few years later, I was with a friend who was with someone from Japan who was the, foremost expert on light language. And she's like, oh, yes, you are speaking light language. And it is very indigenous to Native American. It's very earthy. And this is what you were saying. And I just leaned into that. And
I love that.
it is because it allows people to have healings and activations and kind of give that tangible belief system of not just saying something and feeling it. You feel the energy of those sounds. And one question that I have that may be specific for you is that intuitively I feel that the Polynesian, Hawaiian, and Native American cultures are actually like this. There's some type of very interwoven connection between all of these people over tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, let's connect that. When we are talking about light language, for all the individuals who are unfamiliar with what that means, light language is essentially, usually healing modalities is what light language usually is, or profound insight, divine insight, that channels through the system with the inability to have the perception of actual language. You and I are speaking English right now, but when you are speaking light language, technically light language is an energetic patois, which means that it will move between a variety of sounds, perhaps even symbols in the language that might start to sound like a variety of indigenous languages or glossolalia or even faith-based language. It just depends. But truly, why does light language manifest? Light language might sound like garbage, might sound like the weirdest garbage disposal kind of language, right? Because they don't understand it. But what's happening for the channeler, well, let me rephrase that. What's happening for a true channeler, there's a lot of individuals who are actually faking it, but when it comes to a true channeler of light language, the information is so profound that there is not the words. Their words have not been created to quantify the actual experience. So, for example, in a lot of Native American and Polynesian cultures, there is not one way to describe something. So, for example, in Hawaiian, there's no word for a cross. You have to describe the action of a cross. It's a descriptive language. I'll use a modern connection. So, most people have seen the film Moana, right? And technically, if you look at the name Moana, which is a genderless name, Moana doesn't mean sea. Moana means to move into the deepest part of the ocean. That's what it translates into. But you can't say that as a name. So it is succinctly moved into the name of Moana, which is male and female. The deepest part of the ocean is that translation. But in order to say that name effectively, you have to see the visualization of what it means in order to get the point across. So that way the interpreter knows what it is. Light language is the same. Light language is a channeled insight, channeled information that technically, for me as a person who observes light language, here's how I know when someone is speaking pure light language. When I listen to them speak, there's no hiccups in the energetic cord. Usually when someone is trying to figure it out, when they're first on the I want to try light language, there's still ego in the cords, which is normal because we're human, which sounds like there's a little hiccup. A little bit of hiccup comes through. But when true light language channels forward, from a visual perspective, as your seer, it doesn't even look like words. It literally looks like images. Meaning, for me, as a person who translates light languages, regardless if they're coming from indigenous backgrounds or astral projections, when I translate a light language, it's the visualization of what it does. And I've translated young children to people in their 90s. But when they speak light language, you have to decipher, oh, they're calling in from that star resource going into over here, and it's going into that part of the bone over there. Because that's what it looks like. Because it looks like a series of codes that leave their body. I might have gone down a big tangent just then.
Oh, but it's such a great tangent because, light language is code. And, for me personally, when I speak my light language, my hands are moving and I don't necessarily have any control of what they're doing. It feels like almost like a dance movement that is in a cadence of like music.
Mm-hmm.
And, we also can do light language in symbology. We can do it in art. We can do it in dance. So light language comes in many varieties. It's just not an audible spoken, from another person. It could be done in these wonderful drawings and artistic drawings that light language is present. And
Yep.
when we see it, we get something from it. Or when we're viewing it, we get something from it.
It's oftentimes quite challenging for someone to observe light language because for us as the observer, the person who is not speaking it, we have to move through our judgment because it sounds wild. It sounds strange. It sounds even silly. So we, as the observer, have to get rid of the judgment of that. But when we can get past the judgment of that, literally, you could speak light language to me, and if I just put your voice on mute and just paid attention to the frequencies and the vibrations moving forward, I still perceive the insight and the information and the healing if you're offering a healing. But I've got to move through my judgment. So when individuals are submissively allowing light language to move through them, if they can move outside of the ego, then you'll have a higher rate. That was really hard for me as a person who did not grow up speaking light language. When I would listen to it, I was like, that sounds like garbage. And then when someone challenged me, well, but what does it look like? And I said, oh, I never thought to tune into the frequency of it, so let me see. And then when I started to perceive, just looking at the visualizations of light language, what blew my mind is that it's all frequency. The whole entire thing is frequency, which connects in Wiccan beliefs to the ideas of casting a spell. It connects to your religious beliefs by the idea of proselytizing something, right? It does connect. My original exposure to light language was technically more glossolalia, when you're taking a look at the big evangelical priests who are speaking in tongues. And that's the light language that I actually don't believe, because there is so much impetus of ego behind that voice that I don't like it. However, when someone is channeling a true, what I would consider light language coming from star systems, then it goes right to the core, right to the core. Can I go a step further?
I love that.
So I went down a little bit of a thread, and you can absolutely tell me to stop speaking if you want. But I looked at your podcast. I went onto YouTube and I said, well, let me just see. I'm going to be speaking with my friend Glenn. I have no idea what your podcast is. And I did find one of your episodes where you were speaking in light language. So I observed for just a moment. And there was something really interesting that happened. And I just don't know if you would like me to talk about that in front of your viewers. If not, we'll talk about it privately.
Please do.
So I'm going to explain what it looks like when I listen to your light language. Your light language took probably about 2.5 minutes to get in your flow. Right? When you started to speak, yours is interesting because it's like a slide. Your light language goes in like this. And it kind of like when you go to a water park and like, okay, here we go. And it's that first momentum, the water's coming behind you, and then you drop in. Your light language did it. It took about 2.5 minutes to get there. But once it got in, your light language visually looks like it's going through like a wormhole, where all of a sudden it's peeling. It's peeling back all of this sediment, debris, trauma. And then when it finally got in, it was speaking to core energy, which was really interesting because that technically, I don't know how you view it in your mind, is actually a star language when you're looking at it from coming from another place, which was really fascinating because now I'm going to speak in dichotomy for a moment.
Sure.
Technically, you were speaking star language, but it was very rooted to this terrestrial plane, which tells me I think that you have aspects of light language that are probably indigenous, channeled indigenous to star systems. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
That probably makes sense to no one else but Glenn, but that's what it visually looked like for you. You go down these wormholes and then you just speak to the core system that does have a root here, but actually is very, very connected to a star system.
Yes. One of the groups of entities that I channel is the Palladian Council of Nine.
Oh, okay, well, there you go.
So the Pleiades, who, we'll throw it out there, we're very present in this earthly sense right now,
Mhm.
and are one of our star brothers and sisters of groups that are helping us in our consciousness and our ascension process from afar. I am connected to them, and I'm
Mhm.
also very connected to the Hopi Indian, which the connection.
Yeah.
For me, I am traveling all over the United States. I traveled all over the United States last year to indigenous sites of the Hopi to better understand their culture, to understand their petroglyphs and the messages that are embedded within those, which I'd like to say quite often are light language.
Mhm. Mhm.
Pictographs and petroglyphs are very much activation codes. And for me, it is a remembrance. It is to come back in. And, I have the most profound experiences when I am in these sacred sites where it might be maybe what we would call a touristy place,
Yeah.
and nobody's there except for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's inexplicable. So
Well,
I have that
I
very
love that.
connection of that, and I'm very grateful for that.
What I want your listeners to observe right now is that by hearing your feedback right now, so right now what we're doing is we're gathering evidence of what was perceived. When I watched you speak light language, I just listened to probably about 5 minutes. You were speaking with another guest on, and I didn't really listen to what the final message was. I just kind of wanted to see how you communicate. But what we're doing right now is we're identifying that the information that was perceived on a frequency level is deeply resonant with who you are and the way that you have trained yourself, the way that you have given yourself education, the way that you have perceived a new intel, and the way that you channel insight. So that's our evidence. That's what we're quantifying the information that you and I just shared just then. Can I go a step further?
Oh, please do.
Yeah. Because now let me put on my high seer goggles for a moment. Um, I'm going to say this, and if you want to cut this out of the podcast, you're welcome to do it. But I'm just going to say it anyway. Okay. You have a really profound timeline, of specifically light language, where you do something. It looks like to be in the 2-3 year mark, but it looks like you do something where all of a sudden it becomes more educational. Now, I don't know what that means because I don't know how you would teach light language to another individual in terms of your dialect, but you do something very unique that actually pushes it into a more educational perspective, which then channels more insight on a macro level to other individuals who are ready for that information. I don't know if you're seeding that thought now. I don't know if you've been thinking about it, but it looks to be around the 2-3 year mark where something big does shift. Now, to back up, if your listeners are still with us for a moment, what's happening right now? When I perceive timelines, seership, what I'm perceiving is outcomes that are all based on current realities. My reality now, my thought moments now, which means that if I perceive things that we do not like, that we don't want, we must change current reality. That's what that means. But to continue to go down that seer route for just a moment, when I look at those, I pay very close attention to what is the predominant visualization, meaning that every timeline takes up energetic space. So, because there's an infinite amount of timelines, even in this moment, what I'm paying attention to is, but what is taking up the most space? And because you are feeling more encouraged right now by light language, you just opened up more space, which means all of a sudden the timeline just shifted like this. And if you want that timeline, then we have to continually add energy to that, which probably means that it won't go to the 3-year mark. It goes down to the 2-year mark. And you could probably even make it shorter if you wanted to.
Right. And thank you for sharing that first off, because that's
Yeah.
a great piece of information. Another part of the work that I enjoy doing that is a passion for me is to do grid work. And what is grid work?
Mm.
Well, there's so many definitions of grid work, but it's just noticing energetic connections. It could be between person to person, it could be from land, could be land to person, could be from, there's energetic grid works that span from this planet all the way to all of the planets intercelestially, so to speak, with where
Hmm.
there's connections. And for me, I get the sense that I'll travel to a place and feel like there's a distorted connection, and sometimes I see it as like two energies. So it's like try to think of energy or electricity trying to bridge, but it can't. Like the ends
Hmm.
might be frayed or distorted, and this needs to be reconnected to this, and this needs to be connected to this, and therefore it creates the revitalization of the natural energy flow of how it's supposed to be.
Uh-huh.
And it's exciting because in this process, I've created my own rituals using light language, but I can't say they're really my own, right? I can't say I'm the owner of this.
Right.
I have to say that this is the information that is all available to us, and I'm just tapping into it and then allowing my ego to go aside so I can really focus on the information that's coming in.
Well, so then what we do, because it is all channeled insight, is
Right.
to figure out for Glenn, how can I streamline this to make it cogent and intelligent for other individuals? Meaning that I'm, again, acutely aware that I drew a lot of attention as a kid because of what I can do. But I don't believe that I'm the only one who can do this. I don't want to be the only one in the room who can do this. I don't like how that feels. So, what I've done is to try to streamline the information to be cogent and coherent and to be intellectual for other individuals. So, creating a program where other individuals can follow along, which means that it is not my info, it is shared info, just so happened to be on a platform for multiple individuals. I believe that what you strive to do is a very, very similar thing. You have to take what the downloads are and figure out how can I create programs to allow this to spread out into the macrocosm. Right? There's a little key there, and this is where I have to be very careful, Glenn. Because when I perceive timelines, especially the ones that I perceived as a kid, I was never wrong. And I didn't like that obligation because sometimes if I say certain things, then it just pushes you into it more.
That changes.
Regard Yeah, and I don't want it to feel like it's non-autonomous. It should feel completely autonomous. But the reason why I'm saying that to you is there's something that you haven't found yet, and you're so close to finding it. I'm going to give you a major breadcrumb without giving you the answer. It has to do with landmass.
Mhm.
Okay. And it literally launches the program completely differently than how you're currently thinking about it. Like you're doing some really awesome things, but it's almost like it's like the current of a river going around a rock. It's like that, and there's a little bit of a diversion, but the rock is important. And if you can figure out what it is, how can I unlock it? Maybe you and I can talk about that privately,
Sure.
but the timelines become faster.
Absolutely. That's there's so many new things that have just for me personally have come to me, and this logo, which
Hmm.
um, about 6 years ago, I didn't know it was an actual thing till about 3 weeks ago. It's an actual. So this is the phoenix, which is
Mm-hmm.
the top of the Ben stone, and
Uh-huh.
here I am, just reading, doing my research, just, trying to gain more knowledge. And I'm reading through an old book that is no longer published. And it talks about the Ben stone at Heliopolis in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And then it talks about the Temple of the Phoenix, where the Phoenix is perched atop of the Ben stone. And that I'm like, there's something there for me. That's
Mm.
go to Egypt to experience Heliopolis and work into the three Great Pyramids because there's something there that I need.
You just got so much closer to this timeline because now you're feeling the momentum from listening to someone like me who perceives timelines, right? Like you just got so much closer. Oh my gosh, your listeners are like, "What's happening? Can we go further? Can I tell you another major breadcrumb, if you wouldn't mind?"
No, please do.
What I want you to focus on with that landmass is when you go there. Well, let me rephrase that. When someone like you goes there, your body is going to perceive it very much like there's that TV show on Netflix called Skinwalker Ranch,
Mhm.
where there's all this perception of why are the aliens in this area? Well, technically, it's the land.
It is.
It's the land. And the land, I get so frustrated when I watch that show. I'm like, you're asking all these individuals to come down, including alien photographers, but you're not asking a seer to go down, right? Ask a seer because there's a shape on that land, a very specific shape that has a very specific energy output. That location will have it too. Which means if you are in the correct alignment, which I believe that you will be, you will perceive energy information that comes from land origin. Now, I do want you to spend the appropriate amount of time to really prepare yourself because once you get there, it might feel like a nothing. It might feel like a wild roller coaster, which will make you feel nauseated. And I don't want you to go through that sensation. I want you to go down the route of curiosity.
Yes. I'm
Oh my
always,
gosh, Glenn!
I'm
So
always,
cool!
yeah, this crazy life of Glenn. From fireman to channel to light language practitioner, spiritual guy. So it just proves that, you could, this isn't confined to people that have gifts. I
No.
was putting out fires 10 years ago and
Yeah.
and here I am
Yeah.
teaching people about becoming the highest version of themselves by learning to know thyself and going
Mm.
down the rabbit holes and teaching things. And that's what we both do. It's about bringing out the very best of the human beings that are already here. We're
Mhm.
gifted individuals. We don't know how powerful we truly are because we've been told that we're not.
Mm.
And when we really go back to belief, when we just not just say, I'm a powerful being, but when we actually believe that, things change dramatically. You begin to widen the lens of your perspective, and the reality changes in front of you. The
Mhm.
synchronicities begin to happen, and things show up. And you're like, wow, how did that happen?
How did that happen? Look at what I did. How did that happen?
It's all orchestrated. And we've all been here before. We've all played in this sandbox once before. And this is the biggest development of the new castle. So it's just a great, so to speak.
Right? And I guess the difference is when you build these new castles, these new sand castles, if we think about it that way, what kind of sand are you going to use? Are you going to create an infrastructure that is longer lasting, or are you going to build it on silt? The difference is, what is the foundation? And for me, I'd much rather you build something that has a stronger foundation, that has a longer longevity, than to build something on a movable, amorphous rock bed, something that can shift out.
Right. We want bedrock. That's where we need to
We
go.
want bedrock, Glenn.
We want solid.
That's what you want.
So, Kimo, instead of talking about me,
Sorry about
talk
that.
a
It
little
just
bit more
happened.
about you and all of the cool things that you're doing right now. You've got these groups, you see people individually if they're
Mhm.
interested in learning more about themselves and what you can bring to them, whether it be seeing medically, becoming more intuitive, or just starting to get your wet in the pool of spirituality, and you need somebody who's really honest, heart-centered, and truthful. Kimo's the person for you.
Oh,
I
thank you,
I
Glenn.
just adore this gentleman, and he's even here he's brought more insights for me again. To go, we're going deeper down the rabbit hole. But Kimo talk a little bit about all of the great things that you're doing for humanity and for people, and also for groups if they are so inclined to get you involved into their group.
Well, I mean, you're so kind. Thank you for saying it that way. It was such a compliment, Glenn, especially coming from you. When it comes to learning, I strive to reach as many different learning styles as possible. Meaning that for all the individuals who are more audient learners, we are in the process of creating a series of new meditation attunements. For those of you that are audio learners, for those of you who prefer to learn from the comfort of your own home, you are more introverted, we do have online learning modules that you can take that teach you how to do specific lanes of intuition. We have a new series being released at the end of this year that is more about the healing modalities, offering different insights about that. We also have, for people who are a little bit more energetic and engaging, we have our online seminar series. We do online seminars twice a month. People can show up, ask very specific questions. I lead a one-topic seminar all month where I break down the idea, and then people get little mini readings at the same time who want to engage. There's a community there. I have Patreon learning centers for those individuals who would prefer to have a library of information. I've got Patreon seminars. Then we have one-on-one seminars, just like how you and I are meeting now. So I really strive to reach as many different learning styles as possible. You can reach me on Facebook, on Instagram, on Pinterest, believe it or not. Pinterest, knock on wood. Let's see what happens with TikTok and Lemonade. But I strive to be on as many platforms as possible just to make this information accessible and normalized. And again, I'm really trying to stay away from it doing what even in my own culture has done in the past, where everything goes through the lane of the kahuna or the high seer. And I'm trying to normalize all of this so it doesn't have to go through such specific lanes that it feels like it is inaccessible.
I love that. Kimo, thank you so much for, bringing all of this wonderful information to the masses. It's time to live without secrets. We all know that when we begin to develop ourselves, who we are, that all of the answers reside right here. And we can find that information as we tune into the frequency of what we need to know or what our passion is. And
I appreciate that.
Certainly something that you are adept at teaching and bringing that information to. So thank you. And I love you, dear brother. Where can we find you on the internet? What is your website?
Thank you. First of all, you and I can have play dates any day of the week. This is just so much fun. So if you want to find me, the best way to find me is on my website, thelightseer.com, which will have an outline of how to join my monthly seminars, to see me in session. And in session, you can do a variety of things, from learning about your unique lane of intuition. A lot of people just come for healing and that's it, or attunements, or just insight. It'll give you information on my YouTube station, which is The Light Seer. On Instagram, I am Aloha Light Seer. Pinterest, I think I'm just The Light Seer. TikTok, The Light Seer. Lemonade, The Light Seer. The list goes on. But those are the main places. Go to the website first, though. thelightseer.com.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that we put that link at the very end of the video so you can obviously pause it and take a look, make sure that you get it correctly so you can work with Kimo Kepano and learn more about being your best self in any version, in any frequency that you choose. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Kimo, thank you. I love you, brother. I send you all my love and light. I hold you in the light all the time. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Mahalo. Thank you, friend.
We'll see you next time on the next episode of the Ascension podcast, the Ascension Stargate podcast series. I'm so excited. Thank you.